Joining us now is McCain national spokesman Tucker Bounds. And Tucker, as we agreed yesterday, let's talk about Obama's tax plan. The nonpartisan group says that if you're making between $37,000 and $66,000, you get a break of about $1,118 from Obama and $325 from John McCain. If you make between $66,000 and $111,000, you get $1,264 from Obama, $994 from McCain. So what about Obama's argument that his tax plan is better for the middle class?
Well, I don't know which nonpartisan group. Are you talking about the Tax Policy Center? Is that right?
Yeah,
Dave?
the Tax Policy Center. Right.
The Tax Policy Center is a liberal think tank. While it may not be nonpartisan, it is certainly a liberal think tank, and we refute those numbers because I would tell you right now, as it exists today, John McCain's proposal is to double the child exemption, which from $3,500 to $7,000, and he is guaranteed a $5,000 health care tax credit to every American family. That's something that would, I think, fly in the face of those numbers, but also accentuates what John McCain is trying to do, which is trying to provide tax relief for all Americans so that we can get this economy going, not just some Americans, while raising taxes on other Americans, which is essentially what Barack Obama's plan is. Even by his own admission today, he has confessed that he wants to raise taxes on certain Americans to issue tax credits to some other Americans that don't even pay income tax to begin with. So I think there's a contrast in the plan, and this is a pro-job growth plan. Even today, there's some nonpartisan groups, if you will, that have said that our plan is better for the middle class and spurs greater job growth.
Tucker, you're right about Barack Obama acknowledging that he would raise taxes on people who are making more than $250,000. But if the argument is that raising taxes on anybody stifles productivity, why then would John McCain tax the health care benefits, the $2,500 in health care benefits that he's proposing?
Well, David, he's not arguing to propose any sort of tax on benefits. What he's doing is saying that in order for this to move efficiently through government, we need to issue a tax credit for families and be able to offer on the same hand a tax to those benefits, but it offsets each other even more to the balance and to the favor of the taxpayer. So I'm confused consistently when our health care plan is lied about and they say that we're trying to tax health care benefits when we issue a tax credit that far exceeds any sort of tax liability. It's a nonsensical argument.
Well, let's talk about lying. Is Barack Obama lying when he says that 98% of small businesses make the owners make less than $250,000 a year?
Well, I'm not sure if he's lying or not, but I don't know why he'd want to raise taxes on anyone. I know certainly that his plan did include all small businesses up over $200,000 a year until he a mandate of over $12,000 per employee for their health care, which would be punitive, which would kill jobs. And he essentially walked out on a stage after he was taking criticism for our campaign and gave himself a talking point by installing some new program at the expense of $6.5 billion. But of course, he can pay for every dime. I know I've heard that talking point as well. What I'm saying is if you cut through the rhetoric with Barack Obama, he does want to raise taxes. There's no question about it. He talks about Bill Clinton. He talks about presidents of the past. He wants to raise taxes during an economic crisis. It is by no means no economist would ever say that this makes sense during an economic crisis to raise taxes, particularly on the small business job sector, particularly on those Americans that are participating in this economy and employ others. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, let's try to put it another way. Let's look back at the tax cuts. Did the tax cuts for the wealthy that George W. Bush put forward and that John McCain eventually said was a good idea, did those work?
Well, I think that initially there were some job growth, but I think functionally what we've seen is mismanagement in Washington. No one is going to argue that George W. Bush has handled this economy in the right way. I don't know who that would be, but it certainly wouldn't be me. I would not argue that growing the size of the federal government by 40% over the course of the last 8 years is the right way to handle Washington or the way to manage this economy. We need to beat back wasteful spending in Washington, build the economy from the ground up by offering tax breaks so that we can incentivize job growth. I think that every economist in this country agrees that you provide strategic tax cuts so that you can grow the economy, but you don't put a tax increase on anyone when you're facing an economic crisis. Like I said, it makes no sense, and I don't know why Barack Obama's plan includes tax increases.
Well, he says it's to help pay for some of the government programs, to have some fiscal responsibility. But
government's grown by 40% in the course of the last 8 years. Why are we growing government anymore? And certainly, why are we growing it by $1 trillion? It is an absurd notion that we should grow the government.
But Tucker, as you know, you're not growing government when you give people tax cuts. I mean, the idea is if you want to try to balance the revenues and balance the outlays, that's the point of the tax cuts, not because somehow he's going to grow the government. But in any case, that's a discussion for another day. And well,
I hope we do have another day, David, because we obviously need to have a further conversation about this. He wants to grow the government by nearly $1 trillion.
Well, but that's different from suggesting that you're growing the government when you give tax breaks to people. What Obama is saying that's less revenue that's going to come in when you give tax cuts, and he wants to make that up by raising taxes on other people in order to increase revenue. Now that's different from we'll have another discussion, I promise you, about the programs and whether or not he's increasing government spending. But in any case, for today, Tucker Bounds, we appreciate you coming in today, and good to see you as always.
David.
Tucker Bounds, McCain spokesperson. Yep.